what are you trying to do with a business? You're trying to foster a relationship that is an exchange of value, right? And so as I get closer and closer to that customer, I can have a better and better relationship. Now it's going to freak us out a little bit because it gets
when
a little
it's done
bit
wrong, but edge case.
Totally.
Yeah.
And if it gets like more, less opt-in, more opt-out, that's going to freak us out a bit. But like, that's what's really gets interesting. Right. And that's where I think like, if you're just hiring a bunch of the statisticians, like, and that's really what like Google et al. Have been doing, that gets really interesting about what you can build, or at least like the foundation of what you have.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Campbell, what's up, man?
What's happening?
Dude, appreciate you being on here. I love that we got some Zevia just cranking.
I am the United States Dan Martell when it comes to Zevia.
Oh, you got people hooked on it? You're getting
it's great.
distribution?
I'm probably not as good at you as like the evangelism, but it's definitely an addiction in a good way.
That is good. When I went to your event in when was that event? No, it wasn't December.
Feels like
because I did. Yeah, I went December. Then I showed up again in January, and you bought me some and hid it. And then all the organizer or the people attending were like, "What's in there?" Because they thought I was drinking
Dan
vodka.
Martell special.
I said, "That's not vodka. That's root beer." Enjoy.
It's like clear root beer too, which is always good.
It's so tasty. Check it out if you haven't. Everybody watching Zevia. They're not a sponsor, but should be. No, they shouldn't. They should give me equity is what they should do. Patrick, you've been in the software space. I consider you obviously one of the top thought leaders around pricing and
Thanks,
just product. You're top rated speaker. Anytime there's I never try to go after you. Always go first. That's my trick.
There you go.
Talk about the business, Price Intelligently, ProfitWell. Where are we going with the name?
We're at ProfitWell now.
Okay, ProfitWell.
All ProfitWell all the time.
All ProfitWell all the time. I know there was like kind of a refocus of which name to lead with.
Yeah.
Size of the business, clients you work with.
Totally. So long and short of it is ProfitWell, we're focused on subscription growth, which I know is kind of generic. And so we're still trying to figure out our positioning. I know you had April on the podcast as well.
That's her favorite word in the world, I think.
Well, that's all we're trying to figure that out. But we have a core product. It's a free subscription financial metrics product. So you plug in your billing system, get access to your MRR, your churn, all those fun SaaS and subscription metrics. Have about 20% of the entire subscription market on there, which is great.
Wow.
And then we sell products that help reduce your churn with your pricing, and then your accounting and revenue recognition. And that's how we basically make money. Across 10 million ARR, we got about 65, 70 people in Boston, and then also an office in Rosario, Argentina.
And the 10 million ARR is just on the software?
So it's all subscriptions and all software.
Okay.
So our pricing, it's kind of a misconception about our business. It's not a nefarious misconception, but we don't do consulting.
Okay.
We're not like a McKinsey or a Simon Kucher who's going to sit with you, 4 days a week and buy you fancy dinners. Our software, basically, we go out, we collect data, run it through our algorithms, and then that spits out things like price elasticity, relative preference for features, and then we put that into a framework. Exactly. We put that into a framework to basically understand what you should be doing. And we work with anyone and everyone from Atlassian and Autodesk all the way down to like a Lyft or a Blue Bottle Coffee, in terms of like more consumer subscription products. And so and on ProfitWell we have any subscription product you can think of. We probably have that somewhere on the ProfitWell product. Yeah.
And talk about the freemium, the free forever, the free, because I like that concept. It's different. A lot of people don't understand there's different ways to slice it.
Well, I think with freemium, a lot of people, they misunderstand what freemium is and what it isn't, right? So like freemium is an acquisition model. It's not a revenue model. It's not pricing. Like a lot of people think like, hey, let's just put free out there and that'll give us a bunch of leads. Sorry, I just wanted to burp there.
No, that was great, man. You did it with style.
Yeah. I just went off. I didn't want to get that right into the mic here for Jared. Or J-Dog, excuse me. But basically what we're doing is with freemium is you want to think about like a premium ebook. And so for us, we were in this really, really competitive like environment that we didn't know it was competitive, but we launched like very quietly. And then all of a sudden Baremetrics came out and then ChartMogul came out and there were like 30 other products. And so we looked at it and we were going to charge for it originally. We had this idea of maybe giving it away for free. But for us, it was one of those things where, our two biggest competitors raised money, we're bootstrapped. And so we did a bunch of research, and what we found is that basically no one wants to pay for business intelligence or analytics products. The NPS of our competitors, as well as some of the other BI and analytics products in the space, like averaged out to about -15.
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible. Well, the thing is the BI industry is like, hey, you know what? You got a bunch of data. We're going to give you a shit ton of graphs, right? And there's like no intelligence there. It's just like, we gave you a bunch of graphs. Now go do your job, right? No. And so we're like, okay, this is really interesting because you have this environment then where there's data, analytics, insights, and outcomes, right? In order to get the outcomes, you need the insights. In order to get the insights, you need analytics. In order to get the analytics, you need the data. And so we started looking at this. The willingness to pay was terrible for BI products. Retention was terrible.
How do you calculate that? I've seen reports for some of the work you've done. Some clients I coach, Proposify. They've shared kind of your incredible work. And like, is that like survey to the customer? Like, how do you guys get that?
So we send, we go right to the customer, the prospect, the target customer, and depending on what you're trying to do, we'll talk to prospects versus customers versus people have never heard of you but are targets. And we go out.
Do you pay them to answer those surveys?
At times, right? So like with current customers, we might not pay them depending on what we're trying to get after. Because with surveys, if they're 30 to 60 seconds long, you don't have to pay someone.
Okay.
If you want to get anything over that, you really should pay them.
Yeah.
And if you pay them, you can get 15 minutes of someone's time, which is a lot of information that you can gather. And so we go out and we collect this data in a very like regimented manner, and then that feeds our algorithms. So we have these algorithms that we've developed that get to willingness to pay and price elasticity, and it basically takes advantage of how human beings think about value. And so we think about value as a spectrum. So I don't inherently know that this stevia or this Zevia, is $1, right? But I know that roughly different things around this price are $1. And so this should probably be around $1, but maybe I'd give it a little more premium because it's a little bit more healthy and a little bit more like whole foods, if you will, right? And we know that, this can is worth less than the computer that this, podcast might be running on, right? So we can take advantage of that by asking ranged questions. And based on those ranged questions, that data we get, once we clean it and do some other things to it, we can actually get to about plus or minus about 5% of actual willingness to pay. And you can do like the basic versions of what we do and get to like plus or minus 25%. But even then, you're still like getting something rather than what most of us do is not know anything about willingness to pay. So
you figured that out for ProfitWell, the SaaS product, decide to go freemium. And sorry, I'll let you deconstruct the free forever versus the free trials.
Well, basically, we looked at it and we're like, we either should kill this product because it's terrible, or what we found is because we wanted to get to these outcomes, we wanted to help people with their pricing, their churn, et cetera. And to do that properly, we need data. And so it was an idea of like, well, this can help our CAC, our customer acquisition costs by giving away a free product. We can give a ton of value.
It's like a really expensive lead magnet.
It's a really expensive lead magnet. And it's like netted out, and there was a little bit of like, a little bit of naivete and a little bit of like betting on this, right? Because it's like, it's a big product. Like we have companies that are competitors that they have entire businesses around selling what we give away for free. And so it's netted out though, because now our data network is our network effect with our data is so good that every time we get more accounts on ProfitWell, our paid products get better because we're using that data to basically
And how do you monetize it?
So we have Price Intelligently, which it's getting more and more on top of ProfitWell because that was our legacy, our initial product. So it's going to look a lot different in the next couple of years, where it'll look like touchless software at some point. Like we'll have a $50 a month option for Price Intelligently at some point in the next couple of years.
To give you some thoughts on how to fix your pricing.
Totally. Well, it'll probably be things that actually just fix your pricing, right? So think about like, localization, internationalization of your pricing. That's a very like specific problem that with enough data and some good mechanical frameworks, like I can sell you a product that does that for you, right? That automatically updates your currencies and all this other things. There's some billing systems that'll do that, but we're going to have the right pricing data, right? In order to do it better than anyone else. The product that we have right now that is a pure outcome-based product is this product called Retain that attacks delinquent churn. So credit card, we're the best in the world at recovering failed credit cards. And now we're going after voluntary churn as well because we have all this data and we want to attack
if they're active
things.
or not.
We have activity levels because there's engagement data in ProfitWell.
Yeah.
But we also know things like when is the best time to ask someone to upgrade to an annual payment, which helps reduce your churn.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't do it when they're purchasing.
No.
You should probably do it then, but that's not the optimal time, right? And the optimal time isn't the end of the year. There's some sort of time frame when it makes sense, and we know that with the data, and so we can come out with features that do that.
Yeah, and just prompt rate an app. You take care of it.
Totally.
So it's really about revenue enhancement.
Totally. Because with Retain, I don't charge you $50 a month.
Success
I charge you
fee.
based on success, right?
Yeah.
So we have these bands. So we have people paying us 10 grand, tens of thousands of dollars a month for Retain. We have plenty of people paying us $50 a month because it depends on how much we're actually getting for them. And if I can get closer and closer to those products, they almost become, I like to call them anti-active usage products.
Yeah.
With Retain, you don't have to log in to get the value. You just turn it on, it does its job, right? And then you can get back to your customer, you can get back to your product, those types of things, and we can take care of the mechanical stuff, if you will.
In the SaaS context of scaling from the kind of the 2 million ARR, you guys went through that, and you've seen so many companies, in your product, use your product that have done that, kind of the 160K a month onward. What are they doing right to kind of accelerate that journey?
Yeah, from 0 to 2 or 2 to 10?
2 to 10.
Yes, because I think from 0 to 2,
velocity.
you can, basically brute force. I
Totally.
know that sounds terrible to anyone listening or watching this.
You can.
At 0
Laka
to 2.
just talked about, or not Laka,
Totally.
ConvertKit. Nathan talked about how they did outbound.
Yeah, totally.
Like $50 a month.
Absolutely.
Doesn't work. Brute
Doesn't
force.
scale, but
No.
it's brute force, right?
Brute force,
And so I think from 2 to 10, the most successful companies, they're using what's called a value metric with their pricing. So that's how you charge. And instead of charging, hey, there's this tier that has these features, this tier that has those features plus a few extra, and this tier that has everything, charging based on some unit of value. So with Retain, the unit of value is how much money we recover for you, right? And we all don't have like the luxury of that pure of a value metric.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to take a step back and get a proxy. So, for, I don't know exactly what ConvertKits is, but I think it's like some measure of contacts, right?
Yeah.
It's a very traditional marketing automation one. And what that does is basically as people get more contacts, all of a sudden they're willing to pay more because they're like, yeah, I'm being more successful. I'm getting a lot of value from ConvertKit. I might as well pay more for it. And if they get less contacts, they're paying less, which they appreciate. So your churn goes
Price
down,
elasticity.
your expansion revenue goes up, and everything kind of falls into place. And really, that's the one thing that can carry you from 2 to 10, and you can get everything else wrong with your pricing, and you'll actually be pretty okay. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting for the 2 to 10 folks is solving your gross churn on some level. I think a lot of people from 0 to 2, they get into this mindset where they don't really think about churn because they're just brute forcing that.
And they're
net
able
growth.
to add enough top of funnel to kind of mask
Totally.
it.
And
It's
they can-
literally, when I look
Totally.
at, the year 4 to 5 is when it starts. You've gotten so much, the churn as a percentage is now like you can't add that many new customers where all of a sudden you start going sideways.
Yeah, you can rack and stack reps, but then all of a sudden you just get to this plateau,
Yeah.
right? And I think what happens with a lot of companies is that the earlier you can solve your gross churn or know where your gross churn should be. A consumer product like Zevia as a service, churn rate's going to probably be 10% on a gross basis a month. And that's terrible compared to like B2B
Churn
SaaS.
through your whole customers every 10 months.
But what's funny about that is that other 90%, you're looking at how like flat can you get that retention curve
How
over
long
time,
can they stick
right?
around, yeah.
So your net retention might be 0 or it might be over because they might consume more, or at least they stick around for a long time, right? So if you can figure out where you should be and then optimize that as much as you can, because Zevia, once they get to 10 or 8, they're probably not going to get much lower than that, just given the nature of the product.
Yeah.
But if you can
So the point
optimize
of
that,
diminishing returns if you.
totally.
Yeah.
And then, because some people, they try to get to 0, and it's like, you're never going to get to 0.
No, and that extra percentage after the 10, if that's your kind of like ballpark, it's just that much harder to get one.
Totally. It just takes so much more effort. But that's the other thing, because going from 2 to 10 and then 10 to 100, like if you don't have your gross churn figured out, like it's just not going to happen, or it's going to be incredibly rare in an incredible market that none of us are probably in.
And then the value-based pricing that obviously impacts his expansion revenues. What about like add-ons? I mean, plans are, especially if you're, it seems like every SaaS, not all, but like most of them start, SMB, mid-market, and move up market. Is that something they should be thinking about at that size from your perspective?
It depends on their DNA. I think add-ons, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I look at someone's pricing strategy, it's do you have a value metric? That's the first thing I look at. Well, really, I look at like how their ARPU is growing. Because if their ARPU hasn't grown, then there's a problem. And the way that you get better ARPU is you have a value metric that your customers grow over time, and then hopefully you get better at getting larger customers and smaller customers. But you also have an add-on strategy. I think add-ons are one of the least used but highest
Most
impact
valuable,
things you can do. Because like switching your value metric, oh, we're contacts or we're users, we should go like that. That feels like you're ripping out like a core piece of your product. So people can get really politicky about it and they won't do something. But like throwing out priority support, hey, here's this add-on, guarantee you 20% of your base is willing to pay for it. Just seeing that consistently.
Yeah, priority support.
Might be $100 a month, might not be a ton, but across your base, it might be a good portion, right? And you could basically just keep giving the same support. You just make sure you prioritize those phone calls or those emails, right? But add-ons are huge, and I think that like a lot of people don't focus on it. Now, I wouldn't give the advice of like going after enterprise unless it's in your DNA. Like for us, our DNA is selling, deals that are at least $50K a year up to, $350,000 to $500,000 a year. And so when we go, we're not like the growth hackers when it comes to like even our free product, right? Like we're not the best in the world at like getting those low end customers or that low end pace. And so for our DNA, if we were to switch over to an SMB, like, hey, we're going to try to go get 100,000, $50 users, it's just not good for us. And I think sometimes people get distracted where they try to change their whole DNA and they go start chasing the Fortune 500, but they're really, really good at demand gen. They're really, really good at some of these more like SMB type things. And I think you got to stick with your DNA, especially from 2 to 10. Once you get over 10, then you kind of have to like go to everything because you just have to for that growth rate.
Yeah, even verticals or industries, focus on one, nail that, and then maybe 10 plus you can kind of broaden.
Well, that's what we're doing. So we really focused on like B2B, a little bit of B2C SaaS, and now like we're broadening everything to subscriptions. So it's not just the B2B and the B2C SaaS, it's subscription media, subscription e-commerce, like everything subscription. And we've always had like a little bit of the base with the free plans, but you're going to start seeing like our product marketing is going to change. Our blog posts are going to change a bit. We're going to get a little more targeted with certain things because we're trying to go deep in those verticals just to sustain the growth rate essentially.
So, I mean, that's one thing that I think anybody that consumes your content, subscribe to your emails, the amount of content you guys put out there. We talked about this in Dublin at SaaS Talk about the media angle. How do you think about that for your business? I mean, again, SaaS business, content, but obviously content's super overplayed.
Yeah.
How did you guys think about it? How did you approach it in regards to the investment? Because it can't be cheap. We were just talking about gear.
I don't know. Jared's got a lot of really good
He's got, I know. He keeps telling me I need all this stuff. And I'm like, for real?
Yeah.
But you're telling me your guys made you buy some jellyfish thing?
Yeah, like
so
20 grand.
So like,
that was after doing it for a year though.
Okay,
so, like,
so at least you had some,
doing,
you knew you were going to invest. But like, how do you think of content and media
for
your business and what SaaS companies might it make sense for?
Totally. I think that if you are in the content world, meaning you're going to use content to grow your business, we're all going to be media companies on some level at some point. And the main reason for that is when you look at the life and times of an ebook, right? Because that was like the offer. You could put out an ebook, 5 years ago, and if it was 100 pages, you were like a god. Like, how dare you not charge for this? This is amazing, right? And you could do that like repeatedly. That's the HubSpot playbook of the last 10 to 15 years, right? The problem is, and we saw this in the data, the life of an ebook has basically gone down from having really good lead velocity for like 6 months to probably like less than 2 months.
Wow.
So, and that's like for good offers, not just, hey, I took my blog post, I made it into a PDF.
PDF content upgrade,
and so
you're good to go.
Now you're looking at situations where you look at some of the best people in the world at keeping time on site, more visits per week, these types of things. Those are media companies. Media companies are the worst in the world at monetizing that traffic, right? Best people in the world at monetizing traffic are software companies typically, right? And so if you're in the content space, and there's a couple of other things that we thought about, but you got to be in the media space essentially. And the constraints for us were twofold. One, it was, hey, like how do we increase the number of like touches per week? So if the average number of touches per week that you can expect through your blog as well as social and things like that, let's say the max average, which we calculated was like 1.6, like how can we raise that to like 5, right? Because like media sites like Bloomberg, et cetera, like they're getting 5 to 7 touches. That's their max average.
Wow.
And so like, how can we increase that? And so the other constraint was, if we emailed you every day, how would we be able to do that without pissing you off?
Yeah, value
Totally.
based, yeah.
And all of a sudden, it just started converging on this media concept. And so,
what's your definition of when you go from just content to media?
I think you start producing a lot more series, a lot more shows. So the basic inroads for most companies is some sort of a podcast, right? Because you're building this audience over time. And that's the other thing you see in the data. When you release an ebook, it goes like this, goes up, and then goes down, and then it's just like this really short long tail and kind of trends towards zero, right? With a podcast audience, it's just like always going up. It might not be like growth velocity or anything like that, but like it's always going up as long as the content's okay, if not
consistent.
Good, right? And so we basically were like, okay, the biggest constraints here, how do we make sure we build the audience? And then the other constraint was, what if we had like 4 or 5 shows? Like, what if we had a show every single day? Different personas, different use cases. And so we started with what I like to call like bottom of the top of the funnel content, pricing page teardown. We have this benchmark report show that we do every week.
Backblaze one. That was good.
Yeah.
My buddy
so,
Gleb,
that's
CEO,
awesome.
he's a good dude.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he came out favorably.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think they're crushing it. I think like Carbonite, they're definitely playing the old school game, which it works, but I think Gleb is going to net out. But long story short, basically we're like, okay, now we have these constraints. And that's what we really tried to figure out. And we're not completely figuring it out yet, but because then it's like, how do you get beyond just, having one interview show is good, but then how do you what do we do next, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do we get more interesting? So we have this like documentary series that we're coming out with. We're like doing a lot of partner shows now. Like there's a bunch of other like cool stories that we're doing. Yeah, man. It's funny because before we jumped in, because we're bootstrapped, because this is not like an easy investment, it turned into.
That's why I asked, because it's real money.
Well, we got into like 2 full-time hires. They were both like young, hungry kids right out of school, essentially. And so that made it a little cheaper. And they were like, yeah, let's do this. And so it took a lot of hand holding by me. But then they know the like technical side of this better than I do. And then it took basically like starting to like really commit to it. And the way that we kind of got over that cost hump is we looked at it and we were like, okay, what if this completely fails? Like, what if it's just like a blog? Like it's just blog content, and that's kind of how people look at it. Yeah. Well, it's stuff that we'd be really proud of. Yeah. Right. And we're like, okay, if we're really proud of it and it completely fails from a monetary perspective, like it's not going to fail beyond where our blog was. Like it's not going to do worse than the content that we're already writing. And so, I think we still haven't figured this out. Yeah. But that's kind of like the mission. And now, what's kind of cool is like Wistia's getting into the game, Jay Akunzo's getting into the game. Like everyone's kind of starting to converge.
Dan Martell's getting in the game.
Dan Martell.
I don't mind saying it.
Dan Martell.
Patrick Campbell inspired right here.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like now it's like cool. Like this is great for everyone. And then like now how do we be the best at it? And that's great to have competition, right? Like I would, you're going to see
the
our
production
site.
quality is crazy. I mean, I saw your studio. What I love is the concept of other personalities involved, so that you don't have to be the Gary Vee show. I think that's really cool.
Well, that was a big thing because it was really easy for me to do it out of the outset because I just have all the like curse of knowledge stuff going on where like I know the pricing, I know this, like I can do it up front, so I don't have to involve anyone else. Now that we have the production going, now we can bring in other people and they can do it, and we can do it really easily.
You can guide the editorial but not be involved.
Totally. And that's basically this year, Q2 2019. The goal by the end of the quarter is I'm not writing anything. I'm just like exec producing essentially. And it's like a big task. You don't know everything that's going on in the inside, but like it's a big task because like our Protect the Hustle series, like that shit's scripted aggressively.
Dude, I mean, I remember seeing the first, when you started doing this, and I was thinking, I think he's scripting everything.
Yeah, it's everything. Except for pricing page teardowns, not scripted. We're trying to get away from most scripted shows.
I mean, just talk about the overhead.
Totally. But like that's what sometimes makes it really good.
100%.
Super tough.
Yeah, every word matters.
Totally. Because like I mean, you're this show, which is new, right? Like you're gonna have some people who are probably really smart, but they're just dry.
They may not make the cut, bro.
Right? And so that's what you have to do. But then you spent the hour, you maybe cut it together, right? And so that's how we were. And we were also trying to like experiment with like, what would be a non-interview show. Yeah. And it ended up the whole second season is just going to be interviews, but they're going to be cut nicely and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, long story short, I think that's the future, man.
Early days media. If you're going to do content, you might as well treat yourself like a media company.
Might as well. And we're looking at hiring.
And I like the idea of shows, characters.
Totally. Well,
right?
think about it. Like, if you
think of Howard Stern, I mean, whatever you think of him, like, he has these characters. He's got Robin. He's got, and that's why I love giving shout outs to J-Dog.
Yeah.
People are like, is there somebody behind the camera? I'm like, fuck yeah. You think I sit here and just talk to a camera by myself? Like, I'm not that disciplined. I almost need it to keep
That's
me on
what
pace.
I used to do when we were first testing this.
Oh, I did it for a bit.
Yeah, you do it too. Yeah.
For like 6 weeks. And then I was like, I need somebody there just to hold me accountable, to show up, to take care of it.
I know we were joking about it. I do feel like you could be the Joe Rogan of this world.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because he's. I know he's heavily influenced our gear.
But only because like I think that your personality and your connections and also your incentives, like what you're trying to do with like your brand and stuff, it's like the perfect like convergence of like you. I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to give up this time. I know you protect your time really well, but like you doing a 3-hour like interview with someone and like keeping
I can do it. I mean, we do it
like,
anyways.
Totally
we go for dinner and we'll talk for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, you do it anyways, and I think that
sometimes I
that's
wish that those and that was it. And I definitely try not to make it about Q&A. Man, it's like any new medium. I remember when I started doing just even my YouTube video, it's like finding your voice, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it's slowly but surely. And I don't want this to be that generic, like, tell us how you got started and all the, and then make it.
But what's funny is like there are people, like you ever watch Hot Ones? I think we talked about this at one point.
Oh, the wing thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen an episode.
Like Sean Evans, like that show, the wings are interesting and it's like a side thing.
Yeah.
But he's just such a great interviewer. And I think, and that's why like he can have like the generic podcast.
Yeah.
And it can be better than anyone else's. And I think you have, not to like blow smoke. I have no
Hey
incentive
man,
to blow
keep
smoke up
going.
your butt here.
Do
but
tell.
like, but no, but seriously, I think like you're interesting enough. You have enough interjections and you could interview people in that style. Like I think there's like, I don't know if I could do that. Like I don't know if I could do the straight interview show just because like I like have some limitations there. But I think you can do it.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
One thing that you did, Patrick, that I think is awesome is those videos with people's names in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I can't tell all our secrets.
Well,
That's
that
still a good
one's
channel.
work. Yeah,
it's
still a good channel. Act surprised if you get one of those emails. But you got a $50K minimum, $250,000 deals, and you're trying to stand out. I mean, that to me is the fun things about building a business. Like, I don't know. I just like it sounds fun. It sounds like, hey, I'm going to do this video. It's personalized and then scale it, right?
Yeah.
If you don't mind unpacking a little bit for everybody, like how did that work? Where'd the idea come up from? And
so the only reason I'm like okay unpacking is because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, that's too much work, and I'm not going to.
They won't do it. People don't like doing hard.
I'm not going to tell you exactly like ROI. The ROI is insane. Not even because of our ARPU. Like our ARPU, our average revenue per user, could be so much lower, and it still would make sense. But what we did is all these channels, like we're not getting major channels anymore, right? And yeah, we'll get like Snapchat, but like it's not amazing for like B2B. And so we might get like ABM is basically just a reinvention of email and enterprise sales.
Totally.
That's
People
all
are like ABM is just a veneer on top of things we used to call name
Totally.
accounts.
It's just renaming stuff. So it's like, okay, how do you reinvent email? Well, Vidyard and like Wistia with Soapbox, like some of these things have been good. Like, hey, I can put a video, I can put a thumbnail in there and I can send it. And that's a little bit different. Like it's a little bit novel, right?
Yep.
So we took that a step further and we're like, okay, this is interesting, but how do you do it right? Like if we're going to put all this work in there, how do you do it like really well? And so what we ended up doing is we basically took just the first experiment was I would sit in a room for an hour and then just record all these videos just on like a 5D or something like that. And then we would have like a post producer basically just take every single video and like create it. And it gets a little bit easier because it's like the same format for all these.
Yep.
And then like the thumbnails we would outsource, and like the thumbnails are really what like gets in. And we've experimented with like using a GIF or using like other things. And
so just to explain to people, the experience is you're a founder, you get an email from Patrick. It's a personalized thumbnail.
Personalized video and thumbnail, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you go through? Just like
sure. So I'll say like, hey Dan, Patrick here
from ProfitWell. How many of these have you done?
I've done a lot of these. The script is already coming in my head.
Like, it's just like inseared
Yeah.
No,
like, but it's like, hey,
and go. You're like, hey, it's Patrick.
No, it's like literally like, hey Dan, Patrick here from ProfitWell. And then normally I'll insert something about like, really, really loving the content you're doing through danmartell.com. Like, looks super dope. I actually really watched this video. Like, I'll get like something personal because you're just trying to get people out of the flow. They're like, hey, what's this email? Then they click the email and you're like, oh, this person looked at my website, or they're familiar with my company. That's a big thing. Like, and then it gets into basically a quick pitch because you're just trying to get them on the phone. And so it'll be like 30 to 45 seconds in length. And sometimes we'll cut, like the second half will be like the same and the first half will be like very personalized. But, and then now we have a teleprompter that basically just like we copy and paste this and like it just goes through just to make basically automate it. And I don't know, it works out really well.
Was that your first taste of media in some ways? Like when you guys started that, or had you guys already been doing?
That's a good question. We've been doing, I just think that's good, like outreach.
Yeah.
So like, and then,
But like just video production.
For video, we started taking our blog posts and just doing a video that accompanied the blog post.
Oh, that's cool.
That's all we really were doing because we were like, oh, video is like the future. It's great. I know the Wistia guys really well, so I drank a lot of that Kool-Aid. And so it was one of those things where that started working because like people don't read. Yeah. I mean, it's terrible, but we would write these really, really deep posts and you'd have like 20% of the group get to the bottom and read the whole thing. And those were like our homies. But then it's like that other 80%, like they're not getting the message or they're just like retweeting a headline, that type of a thing. So, it's one of those things where, and then the ABM, we call them ABM videos. That's what came next. And then, then the series is what we're always working on.
I think, we talked about bobbleheads because that guy showed up
in
Dublin with those bobbleheads.
He made those himself.
Those are handmade.
Wild.
People were like, "Oh, that was 3D printed." No, he hired somebody to carve my face into a bobblehead.
That's cool.
But I mean, there's neat stuff like that for ABM.
We're doing some of that. We have a Glowforge in the office, which is like a laser, like basically a laser cutter.
Yeah.
But it can etch and like do a bunch of things into wood and different
cool.
materials. Yeah, and so we're working on. It's just, you know what it is. It's like it's building the relationship, and sometimes it's hard to like stand out from the crowd.
I like that it's creative. Like I just like
totally, and I like that. Like I'm not like I was never like an artist or anything, but this is the stuff I like to create. Like I always like to like build stuff, right? Yeah. And so I get to like screw around with the Glowforge, come up with like a cool thing, and our designer will probably do like the finished like product, and then I'll like help with like getting it together. But yeah, it's just one of those things like standing out to start the relationship. It's the same thing, like, you know, not to use the dating metaphor, which is so overused, but like, you know, if you're using those apps or like even just you're in the bar or whatever, like, you know, like just hey, how are you? Like, yeah, that works. But like if you stand out a little bit, like, and you're interesting, like people want to have that. Bit. Yeah, not too far.
Not that much?
Not that much. But yeah. But just a little bit, like, you know, you start that conversation, right?
What do you think, like, for you guys on the G2 crowds, the Capteras? What's your thoughts on that? Because I see that, you know, for mid-market customers, some people are leaning into it. It's generating a lot of lead flow. Yeah. What are your thoughts? I'm assuming you guys are listed up there with the ProfitWells against.
Yeah. We had gotten to this like crazy. Like PR disaster with them, actually.
Oh, I didn't know this. Sorry.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
Is there any other stuff you got in disasters with I can bring up in the middle of the show?
No, that's fine. No, it's fine. I talked about it in my talk, actually. And so, we had a situation where there was like clearly a fake review. There was someone who put positive reviews on us, and it like came back, and they also put negative reviews on some of our competitors. And so, and then it looked super fishy. It looked super fishy.
Against you guys.
Oh no, for us and against them. Yeah, and so they tweeted it, you know, and these are guys that I have, you know, I've reached out, I've sent these guys notes and been like our competitor CEOs and been like, hey, like obviously we're competitors, but if there's anything we can do, blah blah blah. And so they tweeted it, and then the other competitor CEO retweeted it. They called us unethical and all these other things. And so
you guys you obviously didn't have anything to do
we didn't
with
do
it.
anything. Yeah, at least I mean I don't. It's hard.
But you were proactive.
It's hard to prove.
Reaching out.
Yeah, it's hard to disprove a negative, right? Yeah. And so I like. You know, I reached out to G2 Crowd and everything, and they and this is a category that gets like 100 visits a month, like nothing, right? And so for us to, you know, game this system would have been ridiculous, and so
waste of resource.
And so it's just one of those things where like I interviewed everyone in the company, and I was like, hey, like, did you do this? Did you not? Like, it's not okay you did this, but if you did, like, I need to know so we can fix it, right? And everyone was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And so. And then did partners and everything like that. Didn't find the answer. I have not found the answer. I have some theories, but basically, and then reached out to these guys and wrote them really long emails. Like, didn't get a response, but was just like, we don't want to win this way. Like, if you notice, because they mentioned like other unethical stuff that we do.
You went above and beyond, man. I don't think I would have.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do is just be like, F you guys, like on Twitter, like that kind of thing. But it was just one of those things where it's like, the search for truth is like a big thing for us. It's a big thing for me. And it's like,
it's like a core value.
Yeah. It's like they think that, competitive ads are unethical. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
But like, if something like this happens, like it's clearly this is wrong. And I empathize with like, if I noticed this and they were doing this, I'd be like pissed at them too. I'd probably assume that they were doing terrible things. Right. But anyway, so like handle all that and everything. And like, basically it was resolved, if you will. But it was one of those things where we actually started looking into G2 Crowd and we're like, should we be optimizing this? Should we be doing something? And so we started doing some optimizations and like we get some decent traffic from it. But I think for our category, it doesn't make a ton of sense because it's just subscription analytics. Like it's so niche and most people, we're not competing. I do think that those sites though, to kind of get back to your core question, I think that they're good. Because people are craving information.
They're definitely influencing decisions, man. Like
absolutely.
I don't make a decision on software anymore until I go do some due diligence.
Yeah. I think the problem though is that in what we got swept into is like, so when they did a review of the entire category, G2 Crowd and Capterra, we all lost positive and we all lost negative reviews, all of the companies, which was really interesting. Yeah. And so there's some sort of like review fraud problem there. And
They've
like
got it. They know about
well, just this world, right?
Yeah.
Like just this world of reviews because like, think of Yelp, like there's,
I thought I've heard that they have to take screenshot. If you review, you got to screenshot
you do,
the customer account and stuff.
But like I don't know like how much are they checking it? What's like, cause if there are thousands of reviews getting submitted a month or a week, like they can't be checking all that by hand, right? And so it's one of those things where I think that we've actually talked to, in the wake of this, we actually talked to G2 Crowd and we're like, listen, like we know because we have these tens of thousands of sites on ProfitWell, we know this person is actually using the product. Like we know perfectly. And we know that this company potentially wants reviews. Like we could actually set something up.
Oh, that's huge.
We could build a little product where we're like, it's a little product where you can send this out, take the NPS score. If the NPS score is good, like you can send it to a review.
There are SaaS tools out there doing this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, we could do that. And we talked to like Goddard and some of the crew at G2 Crowd. And we're like still thinking of doing it. But it was one of those things where I think that's the problem. And I think that everyone's coming at this research problem a little bit differently because you have the review sites that are just doing straight up reviews. Yeah. You have Blissfully and those types of companies that are looking at your credit card payments and then want to do something with that data. Yeah. We kind of have this potential as well. Like we don't know on an individual basis, but we could automate this or have people opt into it. Like we would know who has the best retained customers in the CRM category. We would know who has like
so you would actually use that as a indicator to those companies, not necessarily. You could drive reviews for them as a tool set.
Yeah. But we could have someone like
you can have a real like data point.
Totally. Like, hey, they have the best reviews, but they're actually only third in terms of retention.
Yeah.
I don't know. As a customer, that's interesting, right? Now, do they want to put that data out there? Who knows? Like that kind of a thing. We would never force that. Yeah, totally. And that's what we talked to a little bit about G2 Crowd with like, hey, we have some like other data here. Yeah. Like that might be interesting. I don't know. We would have to like, this would have to be an opt-in thing and like all that kind of stuff, but it's something we've thought about.
Have you ever thought of monetizing the back end from a fund? I mean, the other day it occurred to me when I was looking at, I had a few clients that I coached and they were like, we're thinking of raising some, some revenue financing, some debt financing. And I was like, if I'm a lighter capital or somebody like that, like I'm buying. Yeah. You guys have perfect data.
Yeah.
Amazon's doing it already with their.
It's super tricky because we don't we will never sell anyone's data. Yeah. Like we will never sell it directly.
To offer financing.
Totally. We've thought about this.
Okay.
We've thought about,
because I mean, it occurred to me.
So we've thought about raising a fund. We thought about debt financing. We thought about hey, let's white label Lighter Capital or ScaleWorks' debt fund or something that, right? And so we thought about, because I think it really helps our community as well, because ultimately we're trying to create a community experience. And so it's like, hey, here's alternative financing or here's intros to VCs. I think what we ran into, and we don't really care about making money off of that because it's hard to make money off of debt.
Unless you're that company.
Unless you're volume.
You add it.
Totally. But we thought about, okay, well, we can help these companies at least vet. So we were talking to Lighter Capital about hey, when you go through your Lighter Capital application, if you have one of these billing systems, hook up to ProfitWell. We've talked about some of that stuff, but it's also one of those things we're thinking, we're okay, how do we don't want to half-ass this, right? Because it's something that's pretty serious for folks.
Totally. And they don't want to think that you're motivations are not
Totally.
like once you kind of like go past it, it's hard to come back. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And we just don't, like, we're very sensitive about, like, we won't look at anyone's account unless you tell us. Like, we do research the data, but we have to have a minimum of 30. It's anonymized. And, like, we kind of know, like, we've put in some breaks so that we take out outliers right away. Because if you look at some aggregated data and you split it even by one segment, you're like, I know that, like, ClassPass is in that data or something like that. So we're just really smart about it. Yeah. But I think that what we've really kind of focused on is, like, making sure that there's a really clear line there, and we can do the research, and you can opt out of any of the research. We have plenty of people who, like, they're not paying us. They're just like, hey, I want to opt out. We're like, cool, whatever. But yeah, I think it's like we need to be careful about that line. And
it's interesting.
Yeah, it's
like
totally interesting.
Like a lighter could buy the company.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't think we would sell to anyone like that. Like we would go under before we did that.
For sure.
Just because, like, some people were like, oh, sell to PE, and PE would love the data, and we're like, nah, it just doesn't not values align.
Yeah.
But we've thought about raising a fund. Like, I think the mezzanine product for ProfitWell is basically using all of this knowledge to properly buy and get into an M&A situation with a bunch of companies.
Yeah,
right.
Man.
So basically, you know, buying or implementing or building a company every quarter.
right here.
Right? There you go. But
Patrick.
yeah, we've thought about that, right? Like,
cool.
Because if we can get free cash flow from the SaaS products, we're building this, like, community through the media, and then all of a sudden we're sitting there and we're like, cool, like, how do we sustain these growth rates? Like, well, you know, the best thing to do is, like, add products, right? And that we can sell either to this base, but it's going to be a while because we want to get retain for every part of the funnel. So there's going to be an acquisition retain at some point. There's going to be a pricing retain, et cetera. So as we march against that mission and understand that truth, that's going to allow us to, like, at least have opportunities like that, which it's a little daunting to think of because there's enough stuff to figure out right now.
Totally. What do you think the future of SaaS holds for us? I mean, that's a big question, but in regards to, you know, product. So I'll throw this one out there. He once said to me that every SaaS product's going to have a free version.
Yeah, I believe that.
You believe that?
I believe it might not be something directly related to their product, but it will be directly related to their customer.
Okay. And
so
when you say that, you mean
like
the problem that they're trying to
like
solve.
You and I talked about some a lead magnet. You even talking about a lead magnet that isn't an ebook, but is like a little app, like a little calculator or something
just like
that.
the greater products that
totally
HubSpot did.
But that's like a free that's a free product basically, right?
That's what Vidyard did with their Go Video/Viewed It.
Totally. And so I think that because of the density, and it's not about like peak SaaS, like peak subscriptions. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're going to get there, but the implication of that isn't going to be, oh, there's no more subscriptions.
I've always thought about this, and we're going to come back to this thread of like, there's a certain amount of, expenses that a company is willing to invest for operational tool sets, right? And back in the day, they might have had to be bigger to buy this hardware to have it on-prem or whatever. Yeah. But there is a certain amount of like, okay, death by 1,000 SaaS products. I
think what you're getting at, and it's something I agree with, is that there's going to be not death, but like a very commoditization of any function-based product.
Yeah, something that's horizontal.
Sending email.
Yeah.
You know, you got 1,000 companies that help you send marketing or transactional email. There's 20% of them that are good, right? From any access that you look at.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you look at what happened with live chat. Every marketing product now has a live chat widget because it's like, oh, it's really easy to build. Like it's easy to get like built. It's hard to get right. But I think any function-based products, that's where they're going to go. And then it's going to be a lot of these outcome-based products where it's like, basically, I just solve it. Like, why do I have to have a WYSIWYG editor? Why do I have to do the work? Why do I have to be sitting here and do the work? Just do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just solve my churn or that part of my churn. And then I'll take care of the other part that's more complicated.
Just building my business.
Yeah. So I think the free thing is definitely a big deal, but I think these function-based products are going to get commoditized.
So do you think, like, an Amazon trying to disrupt itself when they went from, CDs to online, SaaS companies should consider?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, how would somebody disrupt our business model by providing a free version?
Yeah. Like, if I was HubSpot, I would start thinking about, like, how do I blow up my entire marketing product? And not in a way of, like that's going to be around for a while.
Yeah.
Like, database marketing is, it got better with marketing automation, but kind of looks similar, right? You just don't care about what's in your database anymore like you used to because of cost. But I think it's like how can HubSpot start automating some of these little things, right?
Yeah.
And you see this.
So
with
that
like,
it's, again, outcome based. I just use it. I get the outcome.
Totally. Like lead
asking
flows.
me to configure this stuff and figure this stuff out, it doesn't make sense.
Totally. And that's what was beautiful about like Drip or ConvertKit, right? Where it was like, hey, we're going to get rid of all of this like other stuff.
Noise.
And we're just going to focus on this one thing, right?
Yeah.
Problem is that in order to grow, you start to focusing on
Then you
lots of
gotta go
different
to the other
things, right?
bowling pins,
But with AI and machine learning, which, you know, it's going to be a good decade or so before that's
good
even
enough.
useful, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we're all using the same models right now. No one's like innovating on the models right now.
Yeah, you can't afford to.
Yeah, well, it's
PhD.
expensive, and like, you know, obviously Google's going to come out with something amazing, or Amazon
we'll use
is.
our APIs.
Totally, yeah, exactly, and then they'll tax us every
Yeah.
call, right? But I think that's what's really interesting is like, just do it for me,
Yeah.
right? Like if you think about a Zevia subscription, like that's the purest thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, I know I'm going to need this
renewable.
much.
Yeah.
It's renewable. It's probably not going to be an actual subscription. That's the other thing. I don't think you're going to charge a subscription necessarily. You're going to be charging recurring revenue. So when you think about like Zevia, your usage might go up or down depending on the month, depending on your
depends on where
activity
I'm at.
level,
Yeah.
where you're at, et
Yeah,
cetera.
yeah.
So what some of the coffee companies have done, they give you a scale, and then they measure like how much is being used.
They know.
And then they prompt you immediately when your usage, you know, is in danger of needing more coffee, right? And so I think there's going to be a lot of that where you're going to have recurring or predictable revenue.
Because I seen there was
but
a
it might
guy.
not be MRR.
Is his name Scott? He's like an e-commerce. He's got his podcast show. He used to be in the management consultant. I forget what it's called, but his name's Scott. And he talked about like Amazon, essentially saying, well, if we just sent you boxes of things we think you want,
Yeah, send back what you don't.
and then you send back what I don't.
That's
And then
crazy.
I get smarter over time and big enough data set, like you can look at neighborhoods and be like,
insane.
And then literally I just get
great.
better and better and better that when a box shows up, you're like, I want it all.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, I don't know.
That's
if
not.
yeah,
I don't know
it's
how
not that
far
crazy.
away. I mean, Amazon's literally like, you know,
Yeah.
they have little trucks driving around doing the Prime
Totally.
near real time. Like,
And then you get into a situation. So like, if we raise, you know, we're thinking of raising money, and I don't think we're going to, but if we raise a considerable amount of money, where we had like a 5-year project we could
chest.
work on or something like that, I would hire as many statisticians out of the Midwest as possible. Because like Target, all of these other companies, like I don't know if you read that story from Target like 3-4 years ago, where they started sending ads to the house for pregnant moms, and it was like a 17-year-old kid or whatever, and the dad
His
got really
didn't know that
pissed.
his daughter was pregnant.
Came into Target, was like, "How dare you send this?" And then all of a sudden, like they knew based on her shopping habits that she was pregnant, right? Which is amazing to me. Like I think like people like they think, oh, that's really scary, but it's like, what are you trying to do with a business? You're trying to foster a relationship that is an exchange of value, right? And so as I get closer and closer to that customer, I can have a better and better relationship. Now it's going to freak us out a little bit because it gets
when
a little
it's done
bit
wrong, but edge case.
Totally.
Yeah.
And if it gets like more, less opt in, more opt out, that's going to freak us out a bit. But like that's what's really gets interesting, right? And that's where I think like if you're just hiring a bunch of the statisticians, like, and that's really what like Google et al. Have been doing, that gets really interesting about what you can build, or at least like the foundation of what you have, basically. So I don't know, it's interesting. I think in the subscription world, because that relationship's baked so much into the revenue or how you make money, I think it's going to get really fascinating as to how far you take that relationship with those customers.
How do you, I mean, the advice you give around pricing, around, again, relationships, the more you build, the more you can anticipate creating value for them. And I think it was David Hauser recently mentioned on stage, you know, founder of Grasshopper and Chargeify, that you should increase your prices every 6 months. You said it in your talk.
Yep.
I mean, does that mean increase price test? Like unpack that, because that
I don't know.
wanted to run back to their dev teams and be like, hike up the prices.
Yeah, I think that, you know, like most advice, it's like situational, right? Like, and I think that you should be changing something about your pricing every 3 to 6 months.
But that could mean
it could mean
value.
changing up your packaging, changing up your
Add-ons,
target
plans,
add-ons, making your value metric lower, which is an effective price increase. Like if I give you, 6 Zevias a month for $10, and then I'm going to give you 4 for $10, like it's a price increase, but it doesn't necessarily feel like one. Probably with like a good, it does feel that way, but with software, it typically doesn't. And so I think that at a good pace, you should be effectively raising your pricing every 6 months. I think the problem, though, is that a lot of us, we're not innovating as much, or we're in like pretty competitive industries.
Yeah.
So let's imagine
There's a
like,
fear.
as your product gets better, your price should improve because your price is that exchange rate on the value that you're providing, right?
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is like if you increase that value, you should capture some of that, and you should train your customers to expect that. Worst thing you can do is wait like 5-6 years and then raise your price. You're gonna have a ton of people who are pissed off.
Backlash.
Yeah, just because people, I mean, like Drip tried to do that recently, and they didn't really.
But you did give this advice.
Well.
Recently you were doing a session for my group, and you gave the advice to one of my clients. He actually redesigned his whole pricing. Thanks to you.
That's
Noah
awesome.
from Structured Studios.
That's
Shout out
great.
to Noah. But because he pretty much, he's a category owner for their niche, and he was worried he was gonna like grandfather everybody in, and you said, hey, no. That would be really dangerous because you can't increase your ARPU if everybody's already your customer, and you.
Totally. And like that, when you have market share, like that's really dangerous. And so the grandfather discount is what we recommend.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone, you've been so loyal. You're amazing. We've added a lot of value. Like we're going to give you this price, like, at a discount for 6 months, 12 months. Yeah. Everyone else new is going to get the new price. And then after 6 to 12 months, you're going to get the new price, the price increase as well. Yeah. And that typically works really well.
But that's okay. Yeah. 6 months. But he was like
forever. Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
Bad.
It's just a bad idea. Cause like, it's really great to do that. Like when you're at 0 to 2,
it feels good. I mean,
even 2 to 10, it's okay. But after 10, like, and if you only start doing it after 10, you're gonna have a lot of struggle between 10 and 15 because people are gonna get aggravated with you. Yeah. You should just train people to pay for the value that they're getting.
On a personal side, Patrick, as you kind of continue to grow the business, who have you had to become to build this business? Yeah,
terrible person. No, I'm just kidding.
More ruthless.
No, you know what's funny? It's interesting. I have become, I don't know what the exact word is, but like when you're in the 0 to 2 like range, and even the 2 to 10, like it's very frantic, right? Because you're like, oh my God, if I don't do this, everything's going to be terrible, right? Oh, that person, that support request, yes, the thing they're saying is obvious. Like we obviously should have it, but we don't, right? There's all these things that just kind of like nitpick at you and like get inside, and like I don't think I handled that stage really well because like I think I handled it well from a pragmatic standpoint because I just would like put the team on my back, all-nighters, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think I handled it well from like a mindset standpoint. And now I've gotten into this world where I'm not patient from a pragmatic standpoint, but I'm very patient in conversations. I've gotten a lot more patient. My team would probably say like that's not entirely true, but it's not binary.
My wife
right?
would also say that about
totally,
me,
yeah. But it's gotten one of the biggest things that unlocked me was like really working on this concept of the most charitable interpretation principle. So like, let's say you say something that like bothers me, rubs me the wrong way, frustrates me, or it's like you say like half of something and I just assume the second half. Normally what we do, especially as entrepreneurs who are so like type A or so like, direct, is we will just assume too much. We'll get pissed off. We'll get aggravated. We'll do something and then we'll like snap at someone, be too direct. And I've gotten really good about like, okay, someone said something and then thinking in the back of my mind, okay, this person, like assume they're smart, assume they're competent, and assume they have good intentions. If you do that, like they still might be an idiot or something like that, or that the thing they might be coming up with might just be ill-informed, but you at least won't get into the like secondary, tertiary problems of like getting into an argument. And if you've ever gotten into a situation where like someone said something and then you started arguing with them really aggressively, like
that's probably what happened.
And then, yeah, it's probably because then you get to the end and you're like, oh, you meant this other thing. Yeah, I agree with that. And you're like, well, you just went through like 15 minutes of like a terrible thing with someone who's probably important to you on some level. And like you now have repercussions because of that, right? For that future conversation. And so that's helped a lot. And it doesn't mean you're like nicer. It doesn't mean you're less like direct. It just means you're a little more patient with like, before you're like, hey, that's a terrible idea. Like you hear it out, you understand it, then you can talk through it with someone. Most charitable interpretation principle. Yeah. And it works out really well. But anyway, so like I've become more like, I don't want to use Zen because I'm definitely not Zen, but I've become more like, okay.
Empathetic?
Like, I think it might be empathetic. Absolutely. So like when that stuff went down with the reviews on Twitter, like my first instinct was like, F you, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but I didn't do that. I was like, again, like I said, I was like,
reached out.
I mean, these guys have been hurt by us because of like, we eat their lunch on certain levels. We have people coming to us all the time that like are churning off of them. And like, this looks fishy. Like if I was in their shoes, I'd be like pissed too, right? Yeah. And so it doesn't mean like I'm any less competitive, but it does mean I'm going to go, okay, let's not like react to this. Let's respond to this, find the truth, figure stuff out, and then like move on, right? And it helps a lot. It's helped like my blood pressure and sleep and all that kind of stuff a lot. So I don't know if I've changed necessarily, but that's been a big piece that's changed, if that makes sense.
Well, you're aware of it now, so indirectly,
Totally.
if you can change the way you react, then
Well, you know thyself, right? I think one of the it's a kind of a terrible thing, but like one of the things that building a company forces you to do is figure out who the hell you are.
I think it's a beautiful thing, man.
No, but it's horrible because it's like if you knew that before you started the company, everything's great.
Yeah.
Like your third company, your fourth company,
Way
it's
easier.
awesome because
Yeah.
you're like, cool, I know my strengths, I know
Yeah.
my weaknesses, and my weaknesses, just because they're weaknesses doesn't mean it's bad. It's just like I got to do
just is
something
what it
else,
is.
right?
Yeah.
And I think like if you're doing that in the company, like there's a lot of
Got
collateral
it.
damage,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Like
if you're learning as
Yeah.
you do,
totally.
other people on the receiving end of that growth.
Totally. And it wasn't like, so I had terrible friendships like in the early days. My relationship, like in hindsight, it wasn't going to work out anyways, but it was a 7-year relationship that like definitely did not end great because of the company. And, you know, I take ownership, but like it definitely was like exacerbated by the company and all that franticness. Like my health is like gone terrible. Like there's all these things that I had to pay for in order to like to learn myself and know thyself, right? And so I wouldn't go back and do it differently. Like with the knowledge I have now, I'd obviously do it differently. But like to get that knowledge, I wouldn't trade anything, right? But it's one of those things where it's like we don't talk, and this is why I admire like what you've done with your kids and stuff like that. We've talked about that, where it's like you're kind of training them to like learn themselves and like take ownership of their lives early on. And like it's not that my parents didn't do that, but they didn't do it on like the emotional side especially.
100%.
And I think it's one of those things where we could do better at that as like parents and things like that on an average basis.
Where do people find you online? I know on Instagram you're Paticus.
Yeah, and Twitter I'm Paticus as well, childhood nickname. And then just PC at ProfitWell.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn.
It's crazy the amount of people that have your email and you actually do reply to all of it.
I do reply to all of it. I have a system, and it takes a while, but I do reply to all of it. So,
dude, you're wealth of knowledge, man. I really appreciate you being on here.
Good for hanging out, man.
Awesome, dude.
Thanks for watching this episode of Escape Velocity. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with your biggest insight from our conversation. Be sure to check out the next episode.